So, good morning, everyone. This morning, I want to talk about trying to get more from one's desires than is going to happen. And as you know, desire or tanha in the Pali is one of the central forces that the Buddha taught that drives our human suffering. And as we talk about here often, the Buddha taught that craving, that insatiable thirst, as he called it, for pleasure, for existence, for becoming, for stuff, for relationships, lies at the root of suffering or dissatisfaction in our lives. The quote, trying to get more from one's desire than desire was able to yield, aptly captures this pursuit, this futile pursuit of happiness through the endless chasing of desires, a pursuit that Buddhism sees as not only unfulfilling, but inherently misaligned with true peace and contentment. So from a Buddhist perspective, this struggle reflects a real misunderstanding about the nature of desire and the impermanent world in which desires arise. So as we know, the antidote for this lies in cultivating mindfulness, wisdom, and most importantly, letting go. Desire in its many forms, of course, is not inherently bad. We obviously need our desires for survival, but there's a distinction between wholesome desires, what are called chanda in Pali, such as the aspiration to grow in wisdom or to help others, and unwholesome desires, which are rooted in clinging, greed, and attachment. And the problem arises when we expect our desires to yield lasting satisfaction, a promise that they can never fulfill. Because desires are based on impermanent external conditions, which are constantly changing and constantly slipping away. So just think of the common experience of acquiring a new material possession, a new phone, a new car, a new piece of clothing, even a new relationship. The initial thrill of getting what we longed for is undeniable. The brain pumps out the dopamine when we get a new toy or when we anticipate getting a new toy. But over time, that excitement fades. The dopamine subsides. We find ourselves wanting more, perhaps something newer, something better. Or the example of a relationship, where, we start with this honeymoon phase, this phase of excitement, but then over time it just sort of settles into a day-to-day relationship. Again, that initial surge of dopamine in a new relationship is just not going to last. And this cycle of desire and dissatisfaction that the Buddha so brilliantly described, what he calls samsara, the endless wheel of craving and striving that perpetuates our suffering. The Buddha explained this dynamic clearly in the Second Noble Truth when he talked about craving as the origin of suffering. We expect our desires and the fulfillment of them to bring us stability, to bring us happiness, but they always fail to deliver these things in any lasting way. The more we try to squeeze satisfaction out of desire, the more we experience frustration. Why? Because desire is inherently limited in what it can yield for us. It is inherently limited in what it can yield for us. Trying to get more from one's desire than desire was able to yield reflects the delusion at the heart of craving. And this delusion arises from ignorance about reality, a misunderstanding of the three fundamental truths, the marks of existence that the Buddha described: impermanence, suffering, and not self. When we chase after desires, we mistakenly and usually unconsciously, this is an important notion here, unconsciously, believe that fulfilling them will result in some permanent happiness, or at least that's our hope. But this belief ignores the impermanent nature of both the objects of our desire and the satisfaction that they bring. For example, when someone desires wealth, which is rampant in our culture, they think it will provide eternal security and happiness. But once wealth is attained, then they're beset with all these new worries: how to keep it, how to grow it, how to fend off the fear of losing it. I used to see this. Schultz was an affluent community, and I used to see this all the time when I worked with very wealthy folks in my psychotherapy practice. They worried constantly and they suffered greatly about protecting their wealth from others, about market fluctuations, about tradespeople taking advantage of them, and on and on and on. The wealth brought them no happiness, it just brought them additional stress. Similarly, if you think about a romantic relationships, which we think at the beginning is going to be the ultimate source of happiness, this is the one. But over time, challenges, misunderstanding, conflict, and natural changes arise. And that relationship ceases to be the thing that's going to bring us lasting happiness. The problem is not with the wealth, the problem is not with the relationship, it's with our unrealistic expectation that they will yield more for us than they are capable of doing. So, the good news is, as you know, is Buddhism offers us a practical path to break free from this cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. And that path, of course, is the Noble Eightfold Path, which provides ethical, mental, and meditative tools to understand the nature of desire and to help us transcend the grip of desire. We start with mindfulness because it's a key practice, as you know, for observing our desires, watching our desires without becoming entangled in them. When we cultivate mindfulness, we notice how they arise, how our desires arise, how they drive our actions, how they motivate us, how they preoccupy us. We ruminate, I want this, oh, I can't stop thinking about this new toy, and then how they dissipate over time. For instance, when craving for a new possession arises, our mindfulness practice allows us to pause, observe the craving without immediately acting on it. A wise practice that someone suggested to me one time is that if we're online and we see something, we just think we must have it. It just seems so compelling, that urge for it. Put it in your cart, let it sit for 24 hours. Come back to it the next day and see if it still has the same allure. When I do this, I realize by then it's sort of like, I can probably live without it. Because that initial dopamine surge when I saw it online has receded. Over time, the practice of not immediately acting on our desires, putting in not just a short pause, but a longer pause, in whatever form, reveals the impermanence of our desires and helps loosen our attachment to them. And then we add to that the cultivation of wisdom, which involves clearly seeing the limitations of desire. We understand that fulfilling our desires only brings temporary joy or happiness. That's the wisdom piece. Through meditation and reflection, we develop insight into the nature of impermanence, and we realize that no external object or experience is ever going to yield lasting happiness. This is a profound and critically important insight. Now, this doesn't mean we renounce all desires, that we don't stop, enjoying things, but we put it in this perspective. We approach these things with a sense of balance, with less of a sense of attachment. Letting go, this practice of letting go, releasing clinging to desires and their outcomes. Yes, we fulfill them, but we don't get bogged down in expecting the outcome to be something that's unrealistic. It doesn't mean we're apathetic. It doesn't mean we're indifferent. It means we are using this practice of managing our desires to cultivate a greater sense of inner freedom. When we let go, we stop demanding that life conform to our cravings. When we let go, we stop demanding that life conform to our cravings. Instead, we find peace in the present moment. Desires take us out of the present moment. They are focused in the future, whether it's a minute, 5 minutes, or next week. We plan a vacation. I'm thinking about it, and it can really be consuming if I get too entangled in it. For example, think about it from this perspective. Letting go of the need for constant recognition interpersonally allows us to focus, because that's a desire. I want people to constantly validate, constantly recognize me. But letting go of that allows me to focus on being more kind, being more generous, whatever, not just getting the recognition. rather than just seeking that fleeting praise that my acts might bring. Contentment is an antidote to chasing more than desire can yield. We are content with what we have. We are grateful for what we have. When we appreciate what we have and when we recognize all the blessings in our lives, we cultivate a sense of satisfaction that is independent of external circumstances. It originates inside. And gratitude shifts our focus from what we think is lacking in our lives to what is present in our lives, fostering a sense of sufficiency and inner peace. The Buddha offers us, he invites us to step off this treadmill of endlessly chasing desires and instead seek a deeper, more enduring fulfillment based on gratitude and based on the wisdom of how desires operate in our lives. Yes, they offer temporary pleasure, but they cannot yield the lasting contentment that we seek. We will always be disappointed if we expect that, because desires and their outcomes are always tied to impermanence. When we expect more from desire than it can provide, we set ourselves up for frustration and suffering, for disappointment. But with mindfulness, with gratitude, with wisdom, and with letting go, we learn to relate to our desires in a healthier way. Like so many other things, we don't get rid of them. We couldn't if we wanted to. We change our relationship with our desires. And we see them not as something to be eliminated entirely, but to be understood and transcended in terms of that grip that they can have on us. Something toward which we change our relationship, as I said. In doing so, we open the door to a richer and more sustainable source of happiness, the peace and freedom that comes from living in harmony with the truth of the present moment. This is the liberation that the Buddha promised us. And it's not from desire, it's not from clinging to desire, it's not from constantly seeking new toys, new experiences, and new things, but with releasing them and embracing the deeper joy of contentment and the inner freedom that comes with it. So that's some thoughts on trying to get more from our desires than they can possibly provide.